Wonderful. Thank you so much, Julie, for undertaking this beautiful collaboration with me and with my business, Inspire Yoga and Coaching. Thanks everyone for joining us from different places around Australia, and to the listener in New Zealand, much love to you for what's happened in your country recently. Okay, so I want to introduce myself to start with for those of you that haven't met me or didn't listen to last week's webinar. I am a yoga teacher here in Adelaide, and I do love yoga. I love the way that yoga gives me presence of mind and helps me find my intense focus and stability. So the photo on the left is a demonstration of me finding that incredible point of focus and stability within myself. And on the right is a photo of me with my beautiful mare, Honey, Warm Blood, and we're down at the beach. And that was our first beach experience together, and it was very beautiful. So I'm living up in the hills, and I have a beautiful family and a wonderful supportive husband, which makes my life possible with all the things I juggle. So let's have a talk about mindfulness and what it is. When Julie and I were first discussing the possibility of running this webinar and whether there'd be interest, we had a chat about all the different beliefs and assumptions that people make around what mindfulness is. So I'll put a little quote there that I think is quite useful to have a moment or two to think about. So mindfulness is the pause, the space between the stimulus and the response. And this is where the choice lies. And I think as a horse rider, I can really relate to that pause between the spaces, that pause between the stimulus and my response. And I think many of you that are listening can probably also relate. And it's that little sweet moment in between something that occurs and our response to it, where we have a choice about how we direct the future within that moment. So mindfulness is the process of bringing your attention to the experience that's occurring in the present moment. So in summary, it's really just about being present and in the moment, very much like a horse or a dog or many other animals you may have around you who just innately are in the moment all of the time. So mindfulness isn't about thinking about the past or projecting into the future. It's about being here and now. So if you think about when you're riding your horse or you're with your horse, if you're thinking about a past experience or you're stuck in something that may have happened that you may think is a negative experience that may have imprinted in your mind as a negative experience, it can often play over and over, even at a very subconscious level, impacting us and forcing us out of the present moment and into the past. And the other thing that can happen is we can be thrown or projected into the future, where either we're thinking that we're doing something different than what we're doing, or we're worried about what might happen. And either way, neither of those choices are a positive relationship to be having with your horse or with yourself. So mindfulness involves acceptance, meaning that we pay attention to our thoughts and feelings without judging them. So it's about believing that there isn't a right or a wrong. So the judgment leaves the table. So when something happens, you don't say to yourself, that was a really bad experience. You just observe that it happened and notice what your response is. And within that cycle, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on in the webinar, is where you have the ability to be less controlled by your emotional response to something and more empowered in making a decision about what you'll do about the thing that's just unfolded in front of you. So we can achieve mindfulness through what we call cultivating or practicing different types of mindfulness practice. And one of them is through mindfulness meditation. And we're going to offer you a little session of that in this webinar tonight. Yoga, which is another love of mine, is another fantastic way to achieve mindfulness and self-awareness. And there are many other streams and types of practice around there that can also help you achieve mindfulness. So I'd like now to talk with you a little bit about the benefits of mindfulness. And then when I've talked to you a little bit about that, I'm going to share with you some insights into quality of life and your relationship to others, including your horse, of course. So when we're mindful, it helps us reduce stress. It helps to enhance our performance generally, but if you think about horse riding, enhancing your performance as a horsewoman or a horseman, generally, but in particular, this plays out in the saddle. It helps us gain insight and awareness. We can observe our own mind and increase our attention to our horse and to others and to ourselves. So by being present and aware in the moment, we can really tune in to the horse as one and operate from a place of creating each moment the way we want to create it, instead of reacting to little things that might be happening that may build our anxiety or build our stress levels. What I've really noticed as a yoga teacher and as a horse rider is that some of the greatest limitations that I see from people that come to me are a lack of self-belief. Now, this is a very deep ingrained value that people either have or have not about themselves. So I'm not talking about self-confidence and your ability to confidently be in a competition or confidently ride your horse. What I mean is whether or not deep down you believe that you are good at something, or that you're a good person or a worthy person, or a person worthy of having something as special as a horse. So we're talking some pretty deep ingrained values. And what I've really noticed is that people seem to be lacking that generally. It's something that people are missing in their lives. But we can help ourselves overcome those limitations, or what I'd call limiting self-beliefs, by putting practices in place that remind us of who we truly are. So now this kind of leads into a conversation around quality of life. There's a really nice analogy about a lake, and I want to share that with you because for me the picture sticks quite well as a visual to imagining myself, and in moments of stress this visual really helps me. So if you can imagine a lake, and I know we don't have a lot of huge lakes here in South Australia, but if you can just imagine a lake anyway, and imagine that at the surface of the lake it's constantly changing. So if you think about the wind factor affecting the lake, the climatic factors as well, like whether it's hot or cold, whether it's windy, whether the top of the lake is rough, and that all of the conditions that are surrounding the lake are what impacts the surface of the lake and the way the lake looks and moves. But underneath, deep in the depths of the lake, towards the bottom of the lake, it's consistent. So a lake at the bottom is very unchanging. It's stable, it's calm, and this is relating to ourselves here. So the surface of the lake, we can relate to our emotional state and our thoughts. So our thoughts and our emotions fly in and fly out of our bodies and our minds. They're constantly changing. They're forever pulling in new things, and it's a forever changing environment. But the deeper part of us, the deeper part of the lake, the calm, is what is actually authentically us. It's the true place of where we exist. It's what they call the authentic self. It's the place that deep inside we connect with a constant calm and the ability to observe and then make decisions out of choice rather than reaction. And this is kind of the fundamental of mindfulness. Mindfulness is about being in the present moment, and being in the present moment connects us with that deeper, more calm, more consistent part of ourselves, which is where we want to be, because then we're in control of our future by being in the moment and creating each moment as we want to create them. So maybe you've noticed at times that your thoughts are running around in your head, or your emotions are really heightened, and that maybe within those times where you feel like you're so busy in your head, you might have a moment or two where you feel like something in you is aware of this happening, like there's something observing you. For instance, when you're in a drama, or you're listening to someone else's drama, or you're in a roundabout of emotion, and you're going through the motions and it's really busy in your mind and it's all happening, it's all very dramatic, but something in you is kind of another part of you that's listening and watching. And in mindfulness, there's a very strong belief that there are two parts of you that exist. So the part of you that is your thought and your emotion, and the part of you that is a constant calm. So I'd like now to take a few moments to take you into that space. So wherever you are, if you can get yourself super comfortable, so if you need a moment to do that, I'll give you that. And find yourself really relaxed, and if you can, sitting upright. And then if you're able to, closing down the eyes and just observing what's going through your head. So just observing, listening and noticing. And I'm going to be quiet, and I just want you to observe and notice what's going on in your mind right in this moment. I think it's always shocking when we take some moments, and at the beginning of yoga I always offer a meditation with some mindfulness breathing. And it's really shocking for people when they first come to yoga or they first come to meditation and notice actually how much busyness and craziness is going on in their minds, and people actually call that the monkey mind. So this kind of busyness and craziness that goes on in the head isn't the real you. So that's the bit of you that kind of plays out in response to everything that happens around you. And the bit of you that's the calm, consistent part of you that observes, if you've ever had a chance to connect with that. When we talk about that calm part of you and then the busy kind of very distracted part of you, there's a relationship between those two things, yeah? There's a relationship between the deeper part of you that sees and knows it all and the part of you that just runs around a bit headless. But that is a relationship. There's a relationship between those two things. And we're constantly living in a state of activity and busyness and chaos and noises, and all of these things fill up our minds. And it's hard actually to imagine that there's anything more to life than just this constant busyness and churn of things that we have to do, that we have to keep busy on, that we're so busy we can't respond to a friend, or we're so busy we can't actually put our phone down and talk to somebody, or we're so busy with our horse that we can't even be present when we're with it. So that's one way, but it's not the only way. There is another way, and the other way is a very beautiful way, and that's called mindful. So before we go deeper into what mindfulness is and then how we can cultivate a mindfulness practice, I want to just cover off on some of the myths around what mindfulness is and isn't. So mindfulness is a practice that helps you to connect with what you're experiencing right now. So as you're listening to my voice, maybe you're present, or maybe as you're listening to my voice, it's triggering things, or you're hearing things outside of my voice around you in your home or wherever you are, and it's distracting you. So distraction is the opposite of mindful. So as soon as you're noticing that you're just distracted, then you're no longer mindful. So mindfulness is not, though, the absence of thought. And it's not about creating an empty mind. So often have people come up to me in my yoga classes at the end and they say, oh, I really enjoyed that mindfulness meditation, but I just couldn't get my thoughts to be quiet. I kept trying, but I couldn't. But that's exactly what we want to cultivate in mindfulness practice, is noticing that you have become distracted, not cleaning and clearing the mind to absolute nothingness, because nobody can have nothingness in their mind. It's just not possible. We're constantly thinking, we're constantly churning, we're constantly experiencing. But it's the difference between being hooked in and losing control in that constant churn, and the difference between that and observing that you're in constant churn and taking those sweet little gaps in the moments, like we talked about at the start, where you actually have some space to make a choice about something ahead of you or in the moment that you want to see change. So it's really just about becoming aware of our thoughts in many ways. And the other thing that I'd like to cover off on is mindfulness is not always a spiritual practice. Mindfulness does have its roots in Buddhism, And there's a guy in the US who brought out this stream of mindfulness meditation practice out of Buddhism and brought it into a whole movement called positive psychology. A guy called Martin Seligman and a couple of other guys in his field at the University of Massachusetts. So they developed this kind of positive psychology technique, which moved us out of the old school thinking around how we fix people and into how do we actually get people to be positive about fixing themselves. So a very different mind frame. So mindfulness is super useful for all people of all ages, of all walks of life, regardless of their spiritual or religious beliefs. So some people do offer mindfulness practices that are spiritually connected, but it doesn't have to be. It's not the one thing. The next slide I want to talk to you about mindful versus mindful. And Julie's artist from Horse SA has created this beautiful cartoon about the difference between your mind being full and being mindful. And there's a few of these getting around. There's some of owners with their dogs, and some of the images are quite compelling and quite sad in a way, because really it's describing the difference between the person in this cartoon is obviously so full in their minds they can't even be there, they can't see the path, they can't be with their horse, they're so distracted, they're not even there. So the quality of life for that person in that moment, I would say, is very low. And it's missing out, that person, on the relationship with the horse. So the horse, on the other hand, by nature, is in the moment. It's in the moment with that person. And if you have a dog or a horse, you'll know how sad it is when you notice that your animal is with you, but you're not with it. So I want to enter into a little bit of theory here. I'm not going to get too heavy on the theory, but I think this is an important bit of information to share with you. Because for me, I found that thinking about mindfulness, kind of breaking it up and thinking about it logically helps, because a lot of the discussion and learning that we draw in around mindfulness is quite intuitive. So this is some logic. So they say that there are 3 dimensions of mindfulness, so 3 things that kind of need to happen for you to be able to be mindful and to cultivate a mindful practice. So one is how well we relate to or feel about ourselves. So you know that relationship I talked about before between the busy you in your head and the deep calm you. So really it's how the busy you feels about the calm you, and how the calm you feels about the busy you, and how that kind of looks. So how do you think you relate to yourself? So if you were to record your thinking about yourself, what would it sound like to someone else listening to it? And would you be too ashamed or shy to share that? Or would you be really proud that this is the kind of thoughts that go on in my head? So that's what I mean when I say how well we relate to ourselves. And the second point is then how well we relate to others, or how open we are to receiving others. And I'm going to put our horses in this basket as well, because really a horse is, and we have a relationship with a horse, and sometimes for some people a closer relationship with a horse than they do with another human. So the first and the second point here are directly intertwined. So how well you feel about yourself will be utterly dependent on how well you can relate to others and how open you are to receiving others. So you'll probably know this just simply by thinking about if you're not in a good space in your own self and you're feeling sad or down or angry, that you'll notice that people really won't want to come near you, and that you won't really want to be around anyone else. So that's a kind of simplistic way of looking at it. But on a deeper level, if you think about how you feel about yourself and then your ability to connect with others. And then the third point is actually kind of traditional psychology, where this is kind of Sigmund Freud stuff, where there's this kind of assumption that how well we relate to our past depends on how well we can communicate and connect with people in the current moment. So traditionally, psychology just focused on the past, so, you know, regression and all of that kind of stuff, where they'd, in hypnosis, where they'd put people back in time and they'd relive the past and try and unpack it. There's a lot of work that's been done today around positive psychology that suggests that that is actually not useful to do for people at all. Some people believe that elements of it still are, but it's good to put it there because it's still part of how we think about mindfulness, so how well you relate to your past. So an easy way of understanding that is if something's happened in your past with your horse, and when you go to ride your horse again, are you still stuck in that moment? Are you still stuck in the past and you can't actually be present in that moment with the horse to have a new experience and to start again? So I found this picture and I thought it, for me, it just makes me cringe. One, because I can kind of relate to this feeling sometimes in my past. I can remember how it feels to be like this. So I've captioned this here as, what does it feel like to be non-present or mindless? And I don't mean mindless like an idiot. I just mean mindless, like not mindful, not present. And the other question is here, what can we do about this? So if you look at this picture, look at the horse's mouth, look how unhappy the horse is and its tension through its back, its tail, and the rider is just the same. And you can almost see, well, I can almost see that the rider is projecting this fear onto this horse, and the stiffness this rider is feeling is just flowing straight through to the horse. So I would say this person is in some kind of past fear or future anxiety. They definitely are not in the present moment. So the next question is, I guess, what can we do about this? So I'd like to share with you now a small gift around cultivating mindfulness and self-awareness. So I'm going to take you through, actually right now, I'm going to take you through a technique, like a meditation. It will take about 3 or 4 minutes. So get yourself super comfortable again, making sure your spine is upright and that you feel warm and cozy, and yet you feel alert. So some people think that meditation or mindfulness is kind of like that sleepy, vague feeling you can feel, and that's not it. Mindfulness is absolute, sharp and present concentration. So if you get distracted through this short mindfulness guided meditation, that's okay. If you get distracted and notice that you've become distracted, then congratulations, you can give yourself a pat on the back, because becoming aware of when we leave the present moment and we become distracted, that's the most important element that we're aiming to cultivate. So it's building the awareness of not being present and then cultivating being present that helps us get there. That's the pathway. So let's start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sound a Tibetan singing bowl, and then I'm going to walk you through what's called the square breath practice. So we'll start. So I'll just walk you through it and I'll guide you through this. All you need to do is close your eyes and listen to my instructions. So I'll sound by ringing the Tibetan bowl. And now I'd like you to take an exhalation and completely empty your lungs. And then I'd like you to inhale to the count of 4. So inhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold. And keep repeating this yourself. So inhaling for 4, holding at the end of the breath of the inhale, exhaling for 4, and pausing, and keep going. Taking some deep breaths now to begin to come out of this little meditation. Hopefully you're feeling grounded just even from that moment or so, those couple of moments, and you're feeling more present and calm. So these are the kind of techniques, we would obviously do a lot longer than that, but these are the kind of techniques we use in mindfulness meditation. I want to talk a little bit now about existing versus living. So when we're constantly caught up in the busyness and distraction and feeling like we never have enough time, how often do you hear that from people? I don't have enough time. Then perhaps your quality of life is quite low. And I'm sorry to suggest that, but I do believe that that is true. So if you're constantly churning around, I'm so busy, I can't do anything, then really you're on the spectrum, in my mind, as just existing. Unless you're aware of what you're thinking and feeling, you will always be controlled by the thoughts and emotions that are going on in that drama and within that churn. So self-awareness is the practice of observing your thoughts and emotions. And we kind of relate this to waking up from the dream. And that's called mindfulness. So observing and knowing what's happening in your thoughts and emotions means that they no longer actually get to control you, because you become aware and then you realize that you can change your thoughts. You can recreate them. You can repattern them. So developing self-awareness through mindfulness is a super powerful tool to help you manage your well-being and your mental health. Hopefully I've convinced you of that already. I'm just going to let this sit with you, this slide, because I think it's so perfect, and have a look at it. So the mind is a very powerful energy that we can have work for us or work against us. So look at the weight of the burden on the left of the past, the guilt, regret, grievances, sadness. And then the burden of the future mind, which is constantly thinking it doesn't have enough. It's anxious, it's tense, it's worried, it's not sure, it's fearful in so many ways. But if we're in the present moment, it actually feels quite light and easy to be there. So this is just a very quick kind of diagram of what we just did with the mindfulness breath. So when we become focused, we're mindful. When we become distracted by an internal or external distraction, we lose our focus. If we become aware of the distraction, of being distracted, we can refocus and become mindful again. It's as simple as that. And the last thing I want to leave you with here is mindfulness is just one tool needed in a bigger toolbox. This is my personal opinion. I think it speaks realms for the type of internal work you can do to become the best possible you can. But other things like healthy eating, healthy choices. I obviously love yoga, so I'm going to advocate for yoga. Or some other kind of physical exercise, obviously working with your horse and being with your horse. And happiness within yourself and the relationships you have will all become a result of practicing mindfulness. But there are other things, and everyone's a little bit different with what they need in their lives, but it's not a one quick fix or a silver bullet. It's one big part of how you can go deeper in your experience of a happier life, but there are other things that you need to cultivate around you as well. So that's it for me, and this slide just says how to find out more. So along with Horse SA again, in collaboration, we're running some workshops. So there's a workshop coming up in April, like a physical workshop where you come to it, and I'll walk you through a bunch of mindfulness techniques. I've also just launched a Breathe Equestrian 21-day challenge. We've got a few people signed up for that now, and you can start that at any time. And I basically guide you and coach you through a 21-day pattern to get you on the track to ingrain and sustain wellness, including yoga and mindfulness meditation in your daily life. Also offer private coaching. We have a Facebook page there and also an email. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening in and choosing this time to join us. And also it really brings me joy when people choose to deepen their well-being. It makes me feel very, very soulful. So thank you, everybody.